What made you realize this person isn't for me? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. My feelings turned off like a light switch when he rejected my hug because it was at his place of work and his work crush was there. I broke up with him there. I didn't have no qualms. Just done. Over. Not a chance at fixing anything. Story 2. I was going to my friend's punk show at the local record store bookstore. He was driving and complained the whole way about how he didn't understand why I was wasting money on a temporary experience because it cost $8 to get in. Mind you, he wasn't even going, just dropping me off, so it wasn't like he was paying $8. I tried to explain to him that it was just $8, and I was happy to support my friends. Plus, I'd get a night of fun doing something I'd never done before since I never go anywhere or do anything because he didn't want to. He just went on and on about how he didn't get why I'd want to do something like that when it'd just be over in a few hours. He just kept repeating that it was temporary. I finally turned to him and said, life is a temporary experience, so I'm going to enjoy mine while I have it. When he told me that was stupid, I told him, we have very different views on life. I think we're just fundamentally incompatible people. That was the moment it all clicked in my head. He didn't really enjoy anything. He hated going places because it was a waste of time and money. He hated staying home because it was unproductive. He hated pursuing his hobbies if he couldn't monetize them. He hated socializing because he felt like it was a game where he had to choose the right response to level up the friendship meter. He didn't like food because he always chose food he actively hated because he only ate to maximize his protein and calorie intake. I didn't want to be with someone who made life itself seem so miserable. I used to be severely depressed, and I could feel myself being dragged back into that by his constant negativity. I know I couldn't spend the rest of my life like that. Story 3. She turned into a different person when she drank, and at first it was kind of fun. She was feistier and honestly more fun, but it started getting worse. She would share intimate details of our life, make fun of me in cruel ways, and the final straw was when she threw a dart at me. It wasn't an accident. She saw me standing between her and the dartboard, and I watched in slow motion as it flew at my face. Thankfully, I squinted hard enough that it just bounced off my eyelid. But that was it for me. When I got upset about it, she threw a drink in my face in front of everyone at the party. She moved out a few weeks later and took the dog. I miss that freaking dog. Story 4. There are about 40 different things here, but I'll list a few. I'm so fat, fishing for compliments for the 1,000th time, and I said, well, maybe we should eat better. You could start jogging or something. And met with, that's just not me. Having friends over for a game night, opening a closet in the dining area to have a landslide of papers, garbage, and diapers just comically fall out. Coming home from weeks on board a submarine at sea and never being greeted at the pier, only to receive a text asking me to pick up a Baconator for her on my way home, when it took an extra 30 minutes of driving round trip to acquire said Baconator and her being nestled in a couch den with a laptop and a dozen or so empty Dr. Pepper cans and bottles littered around her. Her threatening to leave over me not wanting to do or buy things from time to time. This is actually what spurred the divorce. One last, well, if you won't even do this simple thing for me, then why don't I just leave? And I just responded without thinking, yeah, why don't you? I think you should leave. Story 5. My first wife. I don't remember what exactly happened, but there was a moment when I looked at her and thought, there is no way I'm having kids with this person. Granted, she was an emotional mess, and she'd been getting worse over time. Things had piled up, and it was like a switch had flipped. Just one day I said, nope. Story 6. I had taken care of my ex-wife for almost a decade because they were virtually disabled from depression and anxiety. When the worst possible family tragedy happened to me, not only did they not support me, they told me I wasn't getting better quickly enough. My mother had jumped off a high-rise, and this person told me I had to get better soon so that I can go back to being their caregiver. They were the most selfish narcissist I've ever known. When we went to couples counseling to try to work things out, again, the entire session was my ex crying and having a mental breakdown over their anxiety. They didn't even give me a chance to talk about what I was going through. The counselor said we shouldn't continue until my ex could resolve their own issues. And we never went to counseling again. People talk about weaponized incompetence. This felt like weaponized mental illness. My ex-wife took no accountability for any of their actions. Everything could be explained away by their mental illness, for which they didn't go to a doctor and did not take medication. While I worked at a meat grinder of a tech job, my ex would brag about how they did so much hard work in therapy. When I tried to get a divorce, again, they had a mental breakdown and asked me to stay until they were better. This lasted 18 years until I was dead inside, and I had my own mental breakdown and we got a divorce. I had to pay over $1 million to this person for this experience because of California law. I have to financially support them for the rest of their life. Get a prenup. Story 7. Maybe this is petty, but she thought the old lady from the Titanic movie and Joan of Arc were the same person. After just a couple weeks of dating, I found out she was filled with too much misinformation for me to work with. Story 8. We were in a long-distance relationship and began to have discussions about polyamory, resulted in a lot of tangentially related conversations about how we viewed our relationship. Realized she was going to treat our relationship like a safety net in case things didn't work out instead of a foundation to build on. Nope, that's not going to work for me. Bye, Felicia. At least I can say I did the work and know for certain polyamory is not for me. Story 9. When we were spending 1 day a month together when we lived within walking distance, she just always had raves, parties, shows, etc. to go to and didn't want to waste her days off work. I was only invited if I coerced her to invite me, and sometimes not even then, when I had to argue with her to convince her to come to my birthday instead of her friends. When I realized all of the excuses were excuses and she just didn't prioritize me or love me like I did her, I hate that she stayed with me and that I had to break up with her when I'm the one who cared about the relationship. Shit's hard. Story 1 and a 0. When he screamed at me for hours because we left a dinner with his friends 10 minutes early due to me not feeling well. He was very easily angered, irritated, and I noticed it as soon as the 4th date. Beware of men with anger issues. Story 1-1. I received a huge promotion for work and I was so proud and happy. I had never received a promotion before. We were driving to dinner and within moments of telling her, she immediately changed the topic to some dumb work drama. Story 1-2. When she had anxiety at work, I listened and consoled her and told her it would pass. Told her I'm cooking salmon and asparagus for when she got home. When I had anxiety at work, regulate your own emotions. Everyone else does. For the record, I didn't need her to regulate my emotions. I just wanted to express myself and maybe get an I love you. Story 1-3. A gorgeous woman, around 3 years older than me, from my city messaged me on Instagram and invited me for drinks. The gorgeous woman that appeared to the date was a 45-year-old obese, sweaty man who thought he could turn lesbian straight. Story 1-4. It was prom night and I had some friends over and my BF at the time. My parents bought us drinks, a 12-pack of Red's Apple Ale, and when we got back, I decided to have one. A few sips later, I hear the door slam and my BF is pacing angrily on the driveway, saying I'm an alcoholic and I need to choose him or the alcohol. I walked back inside and handed him his tuxedo and said the alcohol and went back in to hang out with my friends. Mind you, this alcohol was a special occasion I rarely ever drank, and if I did, I was not mean and would never pressure him to partake. A few days later, he called begging for me back, telling me he had never shared his dad, who I'd never met BC. His parents were divorced, was a physically abusive alcoholic. I felt horrible, and we talked it out. Fast forward a month after that, and I'm talking to his mother, and she brings up his dad, and I say something along the lines of, that must be really tough, him struggling with alcoholism. And I swear she nearly slammed on the brakes with her look of utter shock. I explained what he had told me and his mom said, I left him when my son was 2 and he has never been alone with him since. Also, he is a traveling priest who was never home. That's why we got divorced. That man never laid a hand on any of us. And in our 10 years of marriage, I never saw him drink alcohol. So safe to say we broke up after that, and I never really found out what the issue was with that drink in the first place. Side note, I smoked cigarettes at the time, so if there was a hill to die on, you'd think it would have been that. TLDR, ex-BF left me on prom night because one Red's Apple Ale made me an alcoholic and gave him a reason to lie about having an abusive and alcoholic father. Story 1-5. When he stuck his nose into familial business a little too far, was venting after a minor accident between my dad's Jeep and my Nissan, just a scratch. I was upset. My dad went as far as to suggest I should take Uber, which is $60 a ride. Later that night, he asked for details as we were playing Power Wash Sim. He reminded me of the tags, which I didn't know about. Turns out they were due for a change, so I let my dad know. While we were at it, he thought to move the car title from my late mother's name to me and my sister's, just as it says under my mom's will. My dad quickly printed something for us to sign. Upon telling my boyfriend what just happened, he piped up like, "How dare you sign anything without my permission?" He made me second guess what I signed, so I immediately went back to my dad's room to check, which my family knows I just don't do. My dad asked the what and why. Told him I was asked to check. My dad then demanded I text him I will never talk to him again, to hang up and to hand him my phone. Did just that. Over the next day, I felt stupid to realize the number of red flags that went over my head. They did because I was young, dumb, and it was my first physical relationship as a 20-plus-year-old. Now I have found someone who actually cares about me as a person and my hobbies. Story 16. Me and my GF sat down to have a talk as I noticed she was distant with me lately. She then proceeds to bring up a past, random situation when my 8-year-old son tells me I have bad breath, typical as I drink coffee. My GF put the following together. When my son told me I had bad breath, she knew that my breath smelled like the woman I just went down on. I ended the relationship that night. She had a deep mistrust with me and was constantly questioning me about other women. All not true. TLDR, my son tells me my breath smells, and my GF thought that it meant I ate out another girl. Story 17. When I had to clean up her life for her, I quickly figured out I didn't respect her, and I'd never come back from that. So I pretended long enough to maintain access to her life, helped her kick her criminal mooching ex to the curb, sort out her work life, build up some self-esteem to take charge of things going forward, and then had to cut her loose. Unfortunately, I'm prone to taking on projects, so I just stopped dating at a certain point, and I've honestly been way healthier since. I miss the comfort of someone to come to, but it's the idea, not the reality. Story 18. It took me way too long to realize this, but recently I ended things because he kept saying when I moved back in with him, he won't do XYZ anymore. XYZ will change, etc. Not after 10 years, nothing changed. He is an alcoholic and bought alcohol again, despite being broke and owing me and others money, and I finally said, nope, he ain't never gonna change. Any hope I had left is gone. Story 19. The guy I was seeing was super sweet and had a ton of fun in our first month of dating. We went out drinking with my sister and her BF. My sister conveniently got wasted an hour into the night and had to go back home. I told her I would meet her there, ended up getting locked out for the night without a phone charger, wallet, or car keys. No worries, the guy I was with said I could just stay with him. Shouldn't be a big deal, right? He immediately tried to get me to give him a blowjob and then pushed my hand down to reveal he didn't have pants on when we settled in for the night. It didn't click for him that me saying no multiple times, it being 3:30 a.m., and that I was in an unfamiliar city at his mercy would cause me to freak TF out on him, which is absolutely insanity. We clicked so incredibly well, and I wanted to get intimate with him. Just not like that. At least he showed me it was just a facade early on, I guess. Story 20. We were really broke. I don't have even an extra 5 kind. He wasn't pulling his weight around the house, but yelling at me all the time for being lazy. When he did do things, he pulled out the weaponized incompetence. One day he stacked our fragile, expensive plates that had been wedding gifts on top of a mixing bowl with a rolling pin sticking out of it. Moments later, they crashed to the floor, and about half our plates broke in one go. We couldn't afford to replace them, not even dollar store ones. I was screaming at him about how stupid and useless he was, while also telling myself to stop because it's horrible to shout cruel things you don't really mean. Then I realized I meant it. I started making plans to leave the next day. Story 21. This was not a romantic relationship, but a guy I hung out with randomly decided to start talking about his views as a race realist one day. I think that's the term for it anyway. Basically, the core concept was he thought that there's scientific proof that white and East Asian people are the only groups who could possess the intelligence necessary to form societies, build things, or handle complicated jobs, like in the medical field, in law, as an airline pilot, in construction, etc. Went on a long rant about how anyone who's not white or East Asian couldn't have an IQ score higher than 85. Told a story about how he skipped a flight because the pilot was a black guy, which to him meant that the plane was more likely to crash. There was another story about how he won't go to a certain Wendy's because they hired too many people who spoke Spanish. They spoke English too. But I guess speaking Spanish at all is a deal breaker. Got pretty mad when I wasn't on board with these ideas. He'd given no prior indication that he held beliefs like that, and I'm not sure what sparked him to bring it up out of the blue. It was completely random. I decided I didn't want to stick around someone who was likely to be a dick to some of my other friends. Story 22. I took her to my best friend's photography exhibition. My friend had been battling depression after the death of his long-term partner. Photography was his outlet. My partner spent most of the evening on her phone. Anyway, she takes a quick glance at one of the framed photographs, a beautiful black and white portrait of my best friend's partner. She chuckled and said, "No wonder my mate had depression if his partner was that ugly." Story 23. A few months ago, I got to live a childhood dream of finishing off a song with the singer of Alien Ant Farm, AAF being my very first CD, very sentimental. So this was literally a dream come true. When I got home, first thing I told her was, "Thank you for watching the kids in all seriousness so I can enjoy a night out." Her idea. Her response was, "WTF, are you drunk?" For context, she has been sober for 8 years, and I was sober for the entire 3 years we have been together. So I kind of played it off. Then I began to tell her about the rest of the night, and I was still glowing from living my dream. And she had negative things to say about each and everything I was talking about. Not sure if she was jealous that I for once enjoyed myself fully or something else. But that single night turned me off from the entire 3-year relationship. If you can't be excited that your partner experienced something wonderful, then there is no love. Story 24. I had been very clearly suffering for a long time in my long-time marriage. While the good times were fine, I kept them fine because I didn't have the desire to fight with a sometimes very abrasive woman, and she claims that she never knew how bad it was. I finally realized that it would never really ever get better, and I would spend the rest of my life walking on eggshells. And while that was tolerable, it just wasn't what I really wanted out of life. Story 25. As the relationship progressed, I realized that he didn't love me for me, but for the fact that I checked all his boxes, decent-looking, well-educated, well-spoken, career-oriented, and that the things he valued the most in me were the things I valued the least in myself, that, along with a number of other things, lead to the end of the relationship. Absolutely no regrets. Story 26. We were together for 7 years starting when I was 26. Each of us on our own eventually realized respectively what we wanted out of life, including living situations. She wanted to live out 15 minutes from the nearest stoplight, and I want to live in or as near as possible to a large city. That was literally our biggest conflict. Story 27. My ex was raised in a wealthy household, and after we moved in together, I discovered she would let her bills and car payment fall past due, knowing her father would eventually just pay it. At some point, she lost her job, and her father refused to help until she got another. In the interim, I tried to get us onto a monthly budget and had to teach her how to shop for groceries a few weeks at a time and how to budget when there wasn't enough money for everything. I foolishly added her to my limited data phone plan, and in 1 month, she racked up 600 of data overage charges and refused to split the bill with me. I was naive and in my early 20s, but it took way too long for me to call it quits. After we broke up and I moved out, she got evicted. Hope she's figured adulting out since then. Story 28. He constantly compared my paralyzed leg to his residual limb and made me feel like my disability wasn't that bad, despite being paralyzed on one side of my body in many places. Used therapy speak to manipulate me. When I wanted to share the good time I had with a couple of friends with him, it was my very first con, and I had a blast. He ghosted me completely. That's when I realized I was just a tool to help him feel better about himself. Story 29. Sadly, it wasn't the physical and emotional abuse, nor the name-calling of my special needs child. No, I was too dumb and blind to leave for just that. It was when she left me and flew across the country for another man she met online 2 months prior and told me to wait a few months until she was done with him, and then she would move back and marry me. Story 30. This woman I was hitting it off with suggested I come meet her at a local restaurant bar and hang out. When I got there, she was sitting at a video slot machine. I knew she liked to play the odd scratch ticket, and she seemed to have pretty good luck with them. But that kind of luck runs out, and it runs out a lot faster on those video slot machines. It was an instant turnoff, and I left. Story 31. He couldn't talk about issues face-to-face. It had to be over text. We'd be sitting in the same room and be texting about our issues. I would have to sit in the same room as him and text him asking him to please not joke about putting me on a diet. He blamed his communication issues on his parents. Story 32. Me engaged, had been getting to know my new classmates when I went to college a few years late. One very friendly girl in particular, in a long-term relationship herself, became good friends with my fiance and I. We had a few classes together. We'd be in groups for projects, cast in the spring play. She was very silly, very affectionate with everyone, not just me, just a sweetheart. She had been broken up with her boyfriend for about a month, and we were sitting on a couch in a common area at the school. She dozed off and her head leaned over and rested on my shoulder. I looked over at her and smiled. I felt something click in my brain. I said out loud under my breath, "Oh no." A year later, I was engaged to her, and we will celebrate 17 years of marriage in 2 weeks. That was how I knew my first fiance was not the person for me. Story 33. He was very attractive, witty. We liked the same things. He had a good job as a vet tech. All around, really good guy. Then I went over to his house. It was so untidy. Dishes left in stagnant sink water, clothes all over the floor, old food left out, smell of urine through the whole home from his pet rats, ECT. And this was after he cleaned the house for me coming over. Immediate nope. We're still very good friends, but yeah, all attraction went out the window as soon as I saw his home. Story 34. He admitted he hurt me because I'd hurt him, and he wanted me to feel what it was like. It was all fairly small stuff. He was upset that I got weird and jealous once, I think, honestly, and this point it was hard to tell what he was upset about. And he'd gone all quiet and weird. We'd broken up, but were still talking, and had a huge fight on the phone where he said this. Realized he was not the person I thought he was. He went on to yell at me for breaking his heart. He broke up with me, and I never even got an answer for what I did so wrong. Honestly baffling, but good luck to him, I guess. Story 35. When I was 18, I had a crush on a girl who was 2 years older than me. She was cute, beautiful, independent, cool, all that fun stuff. She moved in next door with her friend, who also happened to be my friend, so we got acquainted pretty quickly. She was easy to get along with. It felt like we were on the same wavelength. As the days went by and our interactions became more frequent, I found myself slowly growing more fond of her. She'd often hitch a ride in my car whenever she needed to go grocery shopping, since she didn't have one of her own yet. She always seemed a bit embarrassed when she needed a ride to work or somewhere nearby. She'd go on and on about how, once she got her new car, she'd gladly drive me and our friends anywhere we wanted. A few months later, her new SUV finally arrived. I half expected her to make good on those promises, but nothing happened. In fact, she started to distance herself. The cheerful highs and good mornings disappeared. Even though she still lived with my friend, we barely talked. I got to ride in her car once or twice, but only reluctantly on her part. See, I have this habit of closing car doors a bit harder than necessary. I've had issues before with not shutting them fully, so now I overcompensate. Every time I do it, I make sure to apologize. One time after I closed her car door a bit too firmly, she sarcastically told me to slam it harder next time. I apologized, of course, and shrugged it off as a bad day. But then our mutual friends started pointing out how irritable she'd get over little things in her car. Someone closing the door too hard, putting a bag on an empty seat, even just asking for a ride. That's when the rose-colored glasses came off. Whatever feelings I had for her just faded. We still talk sometimes and remain friends, but I've accepted that she's a bit superficial and overly sensitive. And that's okay. Some people are just better admired from a distance. Story 36. This will sound weird by comparison, but a guy who kept giving me random gifts and made general, unearned compliments constantly. I'm just weird, but I hate feeling like some child that's being handled with trinkets and empty statements. I've never felt comfortable with what most think of as normal courting behavior. When it happens a lot, I nope out. Story 37. We were supposed to meet at my college. The parking lot is at the bottom of a hill. I had to walk up the hill and search for him because he said he was there. Turned out he was watching me the whole time and was just sulking and drinking coffee. He didn't even get up to greet me. He also sniffed me loudly in front of my friends as a joke, but I was just embarrassed to be with him and annoyed at that point. For a different relationship, it's when he didn't tell me until the day before our date that he had a haircut. Made me wait forever in a park all alone, and it was hot outside. I love and enjoy nature, so when he got there, I was happily pointing out plants and animals, and he didn't even care. I realized we just didn't vibe together and had to end things. Story 38, I realized I became the unofficial psychologist of her, and she was trauma dumping on me and lying to me constantly. One time I was talking about something bad that happened to me in the past, and she said, at least you weren't raped like me. She was lying. I knew because she told me that story, but it was more like she was traveling the world couch surfing, and a dude she had been staying and traveling with wanted to have, and she went along with it. Casual one-night stand. That story turned into rape when she felt she needed to compete with my trauma. Took 3 weeks to finally get rid of her. Story 39. I'm torn between the crazy amount of impulsive behavior with zero attempt to rein it in, the selfishness that is not being worked on, the constant yelling at my dogs, the sudden lack of any type of intimacy, physical or emotional, or the shallowness as a person. None of these things showed up before they moved in, and I gotta say, not a fan of any of it. Story 40. When she began getting angry at everything I did to the point where every waking moment was like walking on eggshells, I told her that I felt like there was nothing I could do to make her happy, so it was time to part ways. She was genuinely shocked. Story 41. When I said I wanted to hold off on getting married because we were fighting a lot, and he responded with, "Okay, I'm sorry. No more lessons, no more games, no more double standards." Upon further questioning, he explained that he had been using games to teach me lessons about behavior on my part that he didn't like. Things like having friends or going to therapy. We had an explosive and hideous breakup about 11 years ago. He ruined my credit, my sobriety, my sense of self, and my mental health. I also bet he's reading this. Story 42. I started not looking forward to hanging out with them. We'd make plans, and I wouldn't be looking forward to them at all. Simple, but that's when I knew it was time to end it. We're still super good friends, but it felt like an obligation when we were dating. Story 43. Telling me I was a downer after the death of my grandma, she was like a mother to me. There are a few examples that I could give. Another was the temper tantrums and violent outbursts, punching walls and trying to control every little thing I did, including how I used lotion or toothpaste, withholding money so that I was stranded and not paying after I helped at construction sites. Story 44. When he said he hasn't loved me for the past 2 years, this was many years ago now. The smallest, most important part of me as a wife and a romantic shriveled up and died after that, and everything else that loved him followed. He had put me through so much and would put me through more. And for him to say that, I'll probably be haunted by those few moments forever. Everything on his face, the chill behind his gaze, everything said that he really and truly meant it, and he meant to cut me with it. Thinking about it makes me physically ill. Always will. Story 45. When I realized everything I was doing with my life was an attempt at just connecting with him, and not something I actually wanted to do. I put so much time into trying to join in with his hobbies and interests and bending over backwards to change myself for the tiniest bit of affection. Couldn't figure out for the longest time why I was miserable and didn't feel like myself anymore. Absolute dumbass. Story 46. He threw an entire pan full of food he was cooking across the kitchen at me and then slammed my head backwards into the drywall until he left a hole, and I had a seizure when I asked if he could please stop yelling while the baby was sleeping. Then he tried to kill me when I broke up with him. Definitely not the person for me. Story 47. When I woke up to her standing over me with a butcher knife in the middle of the night, I ran outside and she just stood in the window, looking catatonic with the knife. When I called her the next day, she didn't remember doing it, she said. She was really weird in a lot of other ways, but I was 17 and she got down with me, so I overlooked that stuff. Story 48. One fun story. One time I was cooking in her kitchen and I ended up cutting the tip of my finger. Not a bad cut, but it was bleeding enough. She went to find me a Band-Aid, and all she had was those tiny little sliver strips, so she put one on and went to get another one. It wasn't set just right, no biggie, so I went to adjust it a bit. When she turned back around and noticed me adjusting it, she stopped and said, "Whoa, where's the trust?" What? We ended up getting in a big fight because I didn't trust her enough to apply tiny Band-Aids perfectly to my finger, I guess. Sadly, I stuck it out for too long and stupidly hoped she would change. But that was one of many exciting moments I had with her. I don't know if she was a true narcissist, but she rang all the bells and flew all the flags. Story 49. For me, it was a tad late when I realized, but the fact I had to drag this person to plan for the future gave me a good picture of how raising a family would be with her. Unfortunately, I thought that talking to her and telling her that I struggled with some of her irresponsible behaviors as we planned for our wedding, she kept assuring me her first priority was to get the wedding out of the way and that everything else would be fixed by then. It took a while, me. It didn't. Story 50. When we would go for hikes, he'd speed hike way ahead of me, and then he would make me feel awful for being out of shape and slow. It seemed like he was always in a race to the summit, and I am a, hey, let's stop and look at the flowers kind of hiker. I realized this was a perfect analogy for our personalities. He just wanted to go, achieve this, achieve that, which isn't a bad thing, but we just never were on the same speed or wavelength. I want a slow, relaxing life without feeling like I need to compete. And he needed adventure and action 24/7. So we amicably split ways. Story 51. When I woke up, ankles and wrists tied, him on top of me saying, "Tell me you love me." This was a guy I dated after losing the love of my life. He was murdered, so I was pretty vulnerable. It wasn't until later my friends told me he's a psycho. No Sherlock. Thank God I talked my way out of it. Told him I loved him and he got in the shower. I went through his pockets and he had duct tape FS. He left and I made sure he stayed gone. My family are large and scary, so I had him warned off. I do always think, though, if I wasn't part of a clan, God knows what he would have done. 2 months later, I catch him watching me in my back garden. That was the last time I ever saw him. Some dudes be scary. Story 52. Left me in the hospital when I was in labor to get high or drunk. He knew I was terrified of hospitals, terrified of dying. As soon as the epidural took effect, he left. I couldn't move and he was gone for 3 hours. I was so devastated that my labor stalled. I was only able to progress when he came back. I wanted to get up and run, but I couldn't move. I got diagnosed with chronic heart failure after. I always had it, made me see everything differently. There's no way he didn't know I was sick. Nothing was ever the same after that. Also, reverse psychology, it's a crock of really as a general theme. Ignoring me or trying to make me jealous just destroys everything. If someone acts like they dislike me, like they don't want me or that I'm not worth the effort, that's what I believe. Story 53. Lied about everything, literally big things and small things. Lied and said he spent $3,000 on the purse he got me for my birthday. I literally didn't care how much money he spent. I didn't even ask for a specific purse, just said I want a new one. Lied about his mom having cancer. She went along with it to cover up an addiction problem she had, literally for no reason. We were together 4 years. 4 years too long, and in the last year, he'd send me a photo of an engagement ring he got me every time we argued and told me he wasn't going to give it to me until I could get my together. Ended up getting with a new girl 2 weeks after we broke up, despite being angry at me for getting a new BF a month later. I'd long since grieved the relationship, so it didn't take long to move on. They got engaged a month after that, with the ring he allegedly got me, and married another few months after that. Dodged a bullet. We were incompatible on so many levels, but the lying is what really did it in. Story 54. I realized I was babysitting them. I have my own mental issues and was stretching myself too thin. Thought I just needed space. During that break, I realized how much of a burden was off of my shoulders, just not having to talk with them. Which is really sad, and no matter what, nobody deserves that. Everyone deserves a chance to be loved by the right person. I was definitely not that person. Hindsight is 2020. My new rule of dating is, if I would be happier to not talk to them for a couple of weeks, then it's already over for me. They need to find someone that fits them better. Story 55. He threw a tantrum during COVID because he kept getting Uber Eats because he was terrified of ever leaving his condo and getting exposed, and the Uber Eats drivers abided by the Uber protocols at the time and didn't go into the elevator and directly to his door to drop off the food. In his opinion, I tipped well. Why can't they just go to my door? That's what I paid them for. When I responded, you won't even leave your condo because you're scared, but you expect every Uber Eats driver who is already exposing themselves to different environments to increase their risk further by going more into your building and passing whatever they catch to other buildings, which breaks their own policy because you gave them a few dollars? We had this same argument every day for weeks before it clicked how he really was that entitled. He saw his own safety and comfort as more important than others because he had a lot of disposable income and grew up wealthy and was used to being treated as more special than others. Story 56. She screamed and threw a tantrum because I didn't want to buy her a 2 wall-mounted candle holder made out of wire and tinfoil, basically a creation from a 4-year-old or crackhead sold at yard sale. People were staring and started filming. Bitch, I'm not going to burn the house down for you or become a part of a viral video. I just walked to the car and drove home. Started packing boxes while she still stood there bawling. Best head I've ever had, though. Story 57. I had to spend the night at her parents' place one time, And her parents were strict and religious and didn't want us to sleep in the same bed, so I slept in her bed and she slept on the couch. During the middle of the night, I had an anxiety attack, which I am prone to, which caused me to cry uncontrollably. I guess my episode was close enough to the morning, because when she woke me up in the morning, her sheets were still wet from my tears and my face was still wet and puffy. Her immediate response was to get mad at me and ask me what happened to her sheets, completely ignoring my well-being and mental health. That's the moment I realized she's not the one I want to spend the rest of my life with. Story 58, I was dating this girl for 2 months and we were hitting it off pretty good, but for some reason she was just hard to talk to. She always didn't want to talk about certain topics and I tried, but it was really just difficult to talk to her, especially when we were messaging each other. So I decided to end things with her and she hated me for it, LOL. This happened 2 days ago. Story 59. He was busy with work a lot and often didn't respond to my texts, so I decided to give him some space and let him text me first. And less than 2 days later, I got this woeful text from him about how he just wasn't good enough for me and didn't deserve love. And I was just like, well, not with that attitude. I didn't actually text him that. I hadn't been trying to break up with him at all, but I just completely lost interest at that point. Story 60. He slept with someone else while I was away on a church missions trip we hadn't had. He told my best friend and then got mad at her when she said he had to tell me or she would. I dumped him on the spot. His mom kicked him out of her house. He kept contacting me for 3 months, saying all kinds of different things like she took advantage of him, or they didn't really do anything, or both of them were too drunk to remember. I never looked back. Story 61. She was calling me amor, love, I knew same as Spanish, sweetie, and a few other things after about 2 weeks. Hadn't even slept together yet. She also told me I'm going to have to get used to her approaching me in the gym and kissing me nonstop. She also adjusted her gym schedule to come in when I do. I'm all for physical affection, but not in the gym or like that in public. Story 62. We had a casual relationship. I really liked her, and I was already thinking about making things more serious, but she distanced herself, and after some time, she started dating a millionaire. In a few months, she traveled the whole world and lived a life of luxury, an experience I wouldn't be able to give her. I'm not ashamed about myself. I work hard, and I'm successful. I started at the bottom and achieved a lot, but the life she experienced is simply too far above my level. Eventually, they broke up, and sometime later, she came to me, saying that she wanted to get back together because no other man had treated her as well as I did. We were together for a short time and I couldn't take it any further. Every now and then she would mention a place she had visited or had a souvenir from a tourist spot. That consumed me and I felt diminished. I felt so bad that I didn't take the relationship any further. Story 63. A few things. Some of them TMI. He'd get angry and rage about things. Punch walls, gaslight me. One of the worst things, though, was, well, we had a fan pointed to our bed. We were about to have sexy times. He climbs on top of me and the fan blew on him, and I could instantly smell that this man had not washed his ass. He then had the audacity to bitch at me about not shaving my legs. Story 64. He gave me a chocolate laced with shrooms when I slept over and didn't tell me till after I had already eaten it. He proceeded to eat 3 more pieces and would not let me leave the room, even to use the bathroom. He, at 6'3" and 300 kilos, sat in front of the bedroom door to not let me out. Meanwhile, I, at 4'8" and 130 pounds, sat on the bed and begged to leave. He threatened to hurt me, to tell my mom I was on, tell my job to drug test me if I left. He also took my phone that night so I couldn't contact anyone. He sat there and told me how much he hated me, and he never wanted to see me again, and how ugly and fat I was, but he refused to let me leave while he said those things. I got so scared I crawled under the bed. Eventually, I thought to just give in so I get what I want, which was to leave. I started apologizing for the way I was acting and for crying. Got him to come to bed so he could move from the bedroom door. I did have to have with him. Then he fell asleep, and I was finally able to leave. It didn't stop there. He showed up to my work the next day and said he was planning on killing himself, and he would start making a scene and stealing stuff from the store if I didn't go with him right now. Story 65. He kept bending over backwards to care for his friends anytime they needed it, but actively told me I need to stop expressing my emotions without first double-checking with him and giving him lots of reassurance and making sure every single thing I say is watched very carefully to not ever imply there is anything they could at all somehow have any blame for. Story 66. During peak COVID, the morning where my job emailed us to join a company-wide call announcing that they had laid off 70% of the office, including my closest friends and genuinely amazing coworkers I worked with for 5 years, it left me and 3 other people still employed, but also put us on temporary leave where I would still need to get unemployment benefits, and the question of being able to return was still up in the air after a few months. Basically, I had a huge chance of still getting let go from a job I loved, and eventually was. After a few hours of emotional goodbyes and video calls, finally hanging up the call with that group of people for the last time, with tears flowing out of my face, I get up from my desk and walk out to the living room, where even after her being aware of and listening to the situation, seeing my visible sadness, the only words that came from her were, "What's for dinner?" Story 67. My ex was a gaslighting master until it didn't work anymore. What made me snap was he promised me to have some time together that weekend. He lived with his family, which I didn't really like, while I lived alone. I asked him to come to my place, but he insisted to be me moving towards him. I asked him to be just the 2 of us, and he agreed. So I made an almost 3-hour bus, metro, train trip to his house in the early morning just to be greeted by his parents, put into the car and travel for another hour away to meet with the rest of the family for a random reunion. That day I snapped and definitely understood that our relationship was, and my will meant nothing to him. Story 68. I'm a person who likes to dream and muse about things. It was when there's this question, what will you do if you had $100 zero? My reply of taking a long holiday a few months was not correct for her. When I said that I won't use all the money to do it, she said that she wants me to be more mindful of money and that money should be for investment, that she's worried I will literally do it. I feel that I can longer speak from my dreamy and creative mind, that I should keep my whimsical side from her. First time of many I feel I have to hide a part of myself from her. Story 69, when I shared something I really love that is honestly a little weird, but they responded, "Gosh, it's a good thing. I'm so non-judgmental because I get to hear strange stuff like that from people." When they started arguments anytime I was doing something I enjoyed. When they said, "Remember that time I did that thing for you and you loved it and it felt so good," to get me to accept their support when I didn't want it. Story 70. Every time I made dinner, he'd find something to complain about. Tried getting my toddler, previous relationship, to agree with him on whatever he found fault with. Didn't help with housework at all. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom, but man, I was also struggling with undiagnosed mental disorders, so I'm sure that factored in, but the talking alone was enough, honestly. Story 71. Long story short, I asked her out. She said no. I respected that. 4 months later, I slept with someone else. She went ape, tried to gaslight me into thinking all of our mutual friends hated me, and got that entire friend group to turn on me. I know they weren't initially, because her best friend in the group had no idea what was going on, and said best friend's sister was still trying to get in my pants the party before that. Going to admit it, I spent a good week trying to figure out what had happened with the entire group before I stopped myself and said, "What the am I doing?" and knocked it off. Story 72. We were 7.5 months into our relationship. We planned to wait until we were together for a year to move in together. We live in the South and are both queer and have discussed eventually moving out of here together if we work out, since we both want to leave eventually anyway. All distant future talk on my end, though she always seemed to take it more serious than me. I made it clear these were all years down the line, and she agreed. Long story short, I mentioned to her that a family member extended an offer to stay with him in Arizona if things escalate in terms of safety where we live. I told her that depending on how things go within the next 6 months, we could discuss the possibility of moving. She kind of seemed to get attached to that idea immediately, talking about how she wanted to go visit, that it would be best because the school she wants to go to is much closer there, and her fav aunt lives there. Didn't want to discuss the other potential moves we'd talked about in the past, and a few days later told me she got accepted into a school in Utah, and I Googled the name, and sure enough, it was the same one she talked about going to if we moved. I think that exact moment was when I first realized I was going to eventually break up with her. Story 73. We went on one date. Pretty much went split the bill, seeing as it was a first date. Went fairly well, was considering asking her out for a second date. She texted me a couple of days later asking what the deal was and if I was serious, as she preferred to be wined and dined, aka she preferred when the dude paid for everything when going on dates. I know that's not an unusual attitude, But we'd spent some time talking about the financial abuse I'd been through with my ex in the not-too-distant past, and how that had left me a lot poorer than I'd like. To have all that info and then make a song and dance about me paying for things? Nah, no thanks. I deleted her number. Story 74. It was 3 a.m. She was drunk, running into traffic, and I tried to go after her, so she did get hurt. She turned toward me, took off her high heels, and threw them at my head. As I was ducking down to dodge the shoes, I had a moment of clarity. It became obvious to me that she was not the one, and this was not how I wanted to spend the rest of my days. Story 75. I don't know where to start. When I came to the realization that all the cooking I did, the cleaning, the DIY stuff around the house, and the painting of the bathroom, the 140 pound I paid towards the 200 she had to pay out. Long story. Paying for the specialist dog food she had because she couldn't afford it, and offering to pay halves to certain things so she wasn't using all her money. She took as though I was trying to take over her household. Not the fact I was supporting her while she was at work. I was trying to help make her house a home, trying to lessen the burden she has with not being able to work a lot because of her illness. Or when I came to a realization that before January, the time when we had just started out in late October, even though she stated she wanted to take things slow, she was actively still dating and having with others while also having with me. ADHD and dopamine hits, constantly chasing. She only stopped and got serious when I said to her, no cheating. Convenient. Or, no matter how much I tried giving her affection, being there for her, she would just reject. Or, listening to certain toxic friends about what she should do with her life. These friends only said certain things so she would spend more time with them. She knew that, but still carried on listening to them and taking their advice anyway. Sakura Story 76. When I first met my then-girlfriend, she had a shaved head and told me that it was her taking Co-Trim as she waiting on some cancer results. She wanted to get out in front if she was going to be having treatments that might make her haul fall out. I admired that attitude, and it was when I first got that spark, but fast forward a few years, and we've been in a relationship, it turns out she was lying about it, and her mom shaved her head as a dare, made me question a lot about us, and without the rose-tinted glasses, saw her for the manipulative person she is. Story 77. We'd been living together for years, and I just realized I didn't have enough romantic love left to make it continue to work. The fact that I knew we were more than over, but too scared to mention it due to not being financially able to find somewhere to live on my own. We were terrible communicators, and I was so angry all the time at everything, just built up resentment, and I got mad at him for things that were not his fault. I just hated the person who I'd become. I also struggled with drinking and had been sleeping on the sofa bed for a few years, I think, but every time he came near me or tried to spend time, I just wanted him to be far away. Eventually we had the talk. It was so much easier and more productive than I had feared. He still wanted to make it work, but for me it was just too late. Too many things had changed in us as people, and there wasn't enough love to make it work anymore. I moved. We are both dating other people now. He pops by once every week or so to see the cats. After all, they lived with him for years, and it was both of our first times living alone. We are so much better as friends, and we definitely both have enough platonic love to still care for and look out for each other. One of my cats was very unwell recently, and unfortunately had to be put to sleep. It was a financial and emotional nightmare, and yet he still offered to help with no expectation of anything in return. Though I do cook extra food and send him home with it when he pops in, as he doesn't really cook, there were lots of signs that I think we both saw and chose to ignore. If you get to the point that you're questioning if it's over, if you just want to escape as much as possible, or in my case at least, let resentment build up and start to really realize that your heart isn't in it, and you can't see it changing. But it isn't always a bad thing, and change is just a part of life. For me, at least, it was a positive change, and it's allowed me to really look back on the good times and the great aspects of who he is as a person. We are both happier people now and have grown, and I couldn't be happier. Story 78. When she completely denied having asked a particular question, I realized she wasn't just forgetful. She had been gaslighting me the whole time. Even recently tried to convince me that she was just joking when she snapped at me, claiming to have laughed. We are not together anymore, but I still see her. Makes me wonder how much of the she talked about her exes was even true. Story 79. This was a relationship that lasted 2020, early 2024, 3-ish month break in there. But I was dating someone called Faith. Very early in the relationship, Faith and I were in a polycool with someone named Thomas. The polyamory wasn't the issue. Please don't attack my sexuality and relationship choices, as it isn't the point of the story. Thomas was with us for maybe the first 4-6 months of the relationship before we broke it off. And it was just myself and Faith again. My moment of, they're not for me, was the way they painted Thomas after the breakup. They twisted his image into this cruel, malevolent, evil being who'd manipulated and used us for our bodies. It was long distance, and he talked to me more often than them, amongst other things. When I confronted them about it, they started making up instances and scenarios and claimed he admitted to it all on a recorded call, but couldn't bring up the call when I asked. After that, any other people we both dated, I realized any breakup had the same ending, and it was a huge red flag because they just smear all of their exes' names, and these people were being put on trial for that never happened. It also made me scared to break up with them because we had a lot of mutual friends at the time, and I was beyond worried they'd do the same thing with me. Spoiler alert, they did. Both times. No, I am no longer in contact with them. Story 80, oh boy, this one requires context. Last GF had some issues. Whenever she was stressed or anxious, she would have migraines, which I dealt with, although it meant we almost didn't have any sort of couple life overall. However, there would come a point where she just needed to stay away from everything, namely me, and disappeared for a couple days. 2 times she did this. 2 times she came back aiming to end the relationship because apparently I was the source for all her ails. I groveled, I argued, I cried. By giving her more and more power, I kept the situation going. Yes, I was dumb. Jump back to last Christmas. My entire family was 2,000 miles away. I stayed back because I wanted to spend Christmas with her. Also didn't feel like going. As I was completely alone, I told her that I was going to need her more than usual due to the situation. She was having one of those moods, and it was worse than usual because she hates Christmas, but promised me, I'm gonna do better and we're gonna spend New Year together. We didn't. She disappeared almost completely for 10 days. I was a wreck. When I actually tried to contact her by calling, she brushed me off quite harshly. I felt like I didn't matter at all. She disappeared for 10 days but went mad because I couldn't wait for one more day to talk to her. So I broke it up. It was clear that she didn't want me. And even then, she went mad at me and threw a public tantrum when I went to pick up my stuff. Sorry for the blog post. Story 81. I was dressed up in my best ball gown for a Christmas ball, and he was supposed to come with me. I went to the hairdresser's to get my hair properly blow-dried. I spent an hour on my makeup, and I'd had my dress tailored, so it was perfect. I looked the best I ever had and felt like a princess. I stood in front of him beaming whilst he laid on the sofa in his pajamas, and he said, "I'm tired, I don't think I'll come." I had the best night without him and realized he wasn't the one for me. The person I'm with now said they saw pictures of me at that event and told me they would never ever have turned me down and was upset knowing my partner at the time did. Story 82. This question actually reminded me of a guy in my past. He was my type. I was his. We got along great. We actually, in theory, made a really good couple, but we both realized something wasn't there. We were at different life stages, had different things going on in our lives, and it was hard to understand each other sometimes. We were young and had so much stuff to figure out. One day he called me, and on the phone, he used a sweet word for me. I don't remember, like diminutive of something cute. And I just stopped and realized I can't reciprocate the love he wants, and the love he can give me was not what I needed. We broke up mutually, and we sometimes still speak because we work in the similar fields. I wanted to share my story because I know most of the others in the comments will probably be of exes. Sometimes the person you are with is great. It's just not for you. Now we are both in long-term relationships. I think he has been with his girl for around 6 years, and me and my boyfriend for around 4. Me and him broke up like damn 9 years ago, SMT like that. Both our partners are perfect for us. More perfect than we could have ever been for each other. Both he and his GF are amazing people, and I always get happy when I see their successes. Story 83. Most people in this thread are reporting on actual awful people. Me and my ex were incompatible for many different things, and yet codependent on a lot other stuff that we should have noticed before we finally broke up. After 8 years of relationship, we started dating in middle school. But I think the thing that made me realize just how much we weren't right for each other is when I had with someone else, and the person actually touched me like she wanted me. My ex hated too much touching during, and I think I'm still figuring out just exactly how much I need it. Story 84, use the word redonkulous in earnest. I'm not kidding. My friends thought I was being too severe, but that's really the thing that made me realize we would never work out. There have been many others, from short-lived flings or situationships. One bragged about not voting. Another, who was non-monogamous, said she didn't believe in hierarchical relationship structures, like having a primary partner. Another one liked Nickelback and straight up didn't like animals. Wouldn't even fake a little awe when I sent her pictures of my cats.